He knocked the ring box out of the man's hand. Right there on the stadium floor in front of 60,000 screaming fans and 10 million people watching live on their phones. He slapped it so hard the ring flew into the crowd like a coin tossed into a fountain. The man on one knee looked up in shock. The woman started crying. Security grabbed the stranger immediately, slamming him against the barrier. People booed. People screamed. Someone threw a drink at him. And the man they tackled, the one everyone hated in that moment, said nothing. Not one word. He just looked at the woman with an expression nobody could read. Was it guilt? Was it madness? Was it something else entirely? 10 million people watched it happen live. By morning, 100 million had seen the clip, and every single one of them got the story completely wrong. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. And tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in Houston, London, Nairobi, Toronto, or somewhere else in the world? We love hearing from you. Now let us begin. Once upon a time in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, there lived a young woman named Serena Voss. Serena was 29 years old, and she was what people called a rising star. She had started a lifestyle brand called Bloom, which means she built a business around teaching people how to live beautifully. Her social media pages showed recipes, home decor, travel tips, and personal advice. She had 4 million followers on Instagram and 2 million on YouTube. Serena had turned her smile, her voice, and her personality into a career. She was not a billionaire, but she was successful and growing fast. Every brand deal she signed was bigger than the last. Every video she posted reached more people than the one before. Serena was warm, funny, and genuinely kind on camera. Her followers felt like they knew her personally. They cheered when she was happy. They worried when she was sad. They felt like family. And tonight, they were all watching because Serena's boyfriend of 2 years, a man named Daniel Marsh, had told her he was taking her to a basketball game for her birthday. What Serena did not know was that Daniel had planned something much bigger than a basketball game. He had arranged with the arena management to propose to her live on the giant screen during halftime. He had contacted her biggest brand partner to sponsor the moment. He had invited her closest friends to sit nearby in the crowd. He had even arranged for her favorite singer to play a short song right after she said yes. Daniel had planned everything perfectly. Everything except for one person he never saw coming. Daniel Marsh was 33 years old, and by every measure that the world could see, he was a great catch. He was tall and handsome with sharp features and an easy smile. He worked as a financial consultant, which means companies paid him a lot of money to help them manage and grow their wealth. He drove a nice car. He wore expensive clothes. He was charming at dinner parties and impressive in business meetings. He had met Serena at a rooftop event 2 years earlier, and within weeks, everyone who knew Serena said the same thing. He is perfect for her. He is exactly what she deserves. But there are some things that happen behind closed doors that never make it into the highlight reel. There are some things that only one person knows, and that person is usually too afraid to speak. The stadium that night was electric. The Atlanta Hawks were playing, and the energy was like a living thing, loud and bright and pulsing. Serena sat in her courtside seat laughing with Daniel, genuinely happy, genuinely relaxed. She had no idea. The halftime buzzer sounded, and the lights in the arena shifted slightly. The big screen above the court lit up with a special graphic. A spotlight found Serena in the crowd. The announcer's voice came over the speakers, smooth and warm. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special moment about to happen right here tonight. The crowd started cheering. Serena looked around confused, then looked at Daniel, who was already kneeling down in front of her. He held out a ring box, a beautiful ring inside, diamond catching the light. The crowd roared. Serena's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. 10 million people were watching on the live stream. Her followers were going crazy in the comments. Say yes. She is crying. This is so beautiful. I am going to cry too. It was the perfect moment, and it was about to be destroyed by a man nobody at that stadium had ever noticed. Sitting 3 rows behind Serena and Daniel, in a seat he had not been invited to, was a man named Calvin Webb. Calvin was 34 years old. He had short natural hair, a worn jacket, and the kind of eyes that see everything. To the people around him, Calvin looked like he did not belong at a courtside seat. His clothes were not expensive enough. His shoes were not new enough. He looked out of place among the well-dressed crowd, and several people had already glanced at him with that particular look that says, "You should not be here." But Calvin was there. He had a ticket. He had come for a reason, and that reason had nothing to do with basketball. 3 months earlier, Calvin had been sleeping in a shelter on Peachtree Street. He had been homeless for 8 months, ever since he lost his job as a paramedic after a false complaint was filed against him by a patient's family. Calvin had spent 14 years saving lives. He had responded to accidents, fires, overdoses, and emergencies of every kind. He had held people's hands while they died and cheered for them when they survived. He had given his whole career to helping strangers in the worst moments of their lives. Then one complaint, later proven to be exaggerated and motivated by a billing dispute, cost him everything. His license was suspended pending review. The process took too long and cost too much. He lost his apartment. He lost his car. He ended up at the shelter on Peachtree Street, where he shared a room with 7 other men and tried every day to figure out how to put his life back together. But even at the shelter, even broken and invisible to the world, Calvin's paramedic instincts never switched off. He noticed things. He read situations. He watched people the way only someone trained in emergency medicine can, looking not at what people show, but at what they hide. Calvin had first seen Daniel Marsh 3 weeks before the proposal, not at a stadium, at the shelter. Daniel had come in as part of a corporate volunteer day, the kind where companies send their employees to serve food and look generous for a few hours. Calvin had been sitting at a table eating when Daniel walked in with his group of colleagues, all wearing matching blue-branded shirts and carrying cameras to document their good deeds. Calvin had watched Daniel the way he always watched people, and something he saw made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. It was small. Most people would have missed it. Daniel had been smiling and laughing with his colleagues when one of the shelter staff, a young woman, accidentally spilled a cup of juice on Daniel's shoe. The woman apologized immediately, over and over. Daniel smiled and told her it was completely fine. Then his colleague turned away for 1 second. In that 1 second, Daniel's smile vanished. What replaced it was a look that Calvin had seen before. Not anger, something colder than anger, something calculated. Then the colleague turned back, and the smile returned like a mask snapping back into place. A mask. That was exactly what it was. Calvin knew that look. He had seen it on faces in emergency rooms after domestic incidents. He had seen it on the faces of people who hurted people they claimed to love. He had seen it in the eyes of people who had perfected the performance of kindness while privately doing terrible things. Calvin did not have proof. He had instinct. He had 14 years of reading human beings in crisis, and every alarm in his body was ringing. He started paying attention. Over the next 3 weeks, Calvin did something that most people in his situation would never think to do. He researched. Using the shelter's computer during the 2 hours of daily access they allowed residents, Calvin searched for information about Daniel Marsh. He found Daniel's professional profile, clean and impressive. He found photos of Daniel and Serena together at events, always smiling, always perfect. He found articles about Serena's brand, her success, her growing platform. And then he found something else, a short post on a private community forum, the kind of forum where survivors of difficult relationships share their stories anonymously. The post was from a woman who called herself R. The post was 4 months old. R wrote about a man she had dated for 2 years in Atlanta. She described how he was charming in public, indifferent in private. She described how he controlled what she wore, who she spoke to, how she spent her money. She described how he had once locked her in their apartment for an entire weekend after she spoke to a male colleague at a work event. She described how she had finally left, how she had blocked every contact, how she was still afraid. She did not use Daniel's name. She never mentioned him by name. But the details she described, the job, the city, the timeline, the physical description pointed in one direction. Calvin stared at the screen for a long time. He could not be certain. He did not have proof. What he had was a pattern, and in 14 years of emergency medicine, patterns had saved more lives than certainty ever did. Calvin tried to find a way to warn Serena. He sent a message to her public email, but received an automated response from her management team. He commented on one of her posts, saying he needed to speak with her urgently about someone she trusted. But the comment was deleted within minutes, likely flagged as spam by a moderator. He had no way to reach her directly. No connection, no credibility. He was a homeless man with a suspended license and no proof of anything. Who was going to listen to him? Nobody. He knew that. And then he saw the announcement online. The Atlanta Hawks halftime proposal, Serena Voss, Daniel Marsh. Livestream. 60,000 people in the arena. He saw the date. He saw the time. And Calvin made a decision that he knew would cost him everything. He used the last $40 in his emergency savings, money he had been keeping for a bus ticket to his sister's house in Birmingham, and he bought a resale ticket to the game. He sat 3 rows behind Serena and Daniel, and he watched. He watched Daniel the whole first half. He watched the way Daniel put his arm around Serena too tight when she laughed at something another man said nearby. He watched the way Daniel's jaw clenched when Serena waved at a friend 2 sections over. He watched Daniel's hands. And when halftime came and Daniel reached into his jacket pocket to pull out the ring box, Calvin saw something else in that same pocket. A shape, small, dark, and unmistakable to someone who had spent 14 years working alongside first responders. A gun. 3 rows. That was all the distance between Calvin and the moment. He did not think. He moved. He pushed through the row, past the startled people around him. He reached Daniel just as Daniel was opening the ring box. And in one swift motion, Calvin knocked it out of his hand. The ring flew into the air. The crowd gasped. Then the crowd erupted. Security descended on Calvin in seconds. 3 guards grabbed him, pulling him backward, pressing him against the barrier. He did not fight them. He did not shout. He looked at Serena, who was staring at him with tears streaming down her face, eyes wide with shock and confusion and humiliation. And Calvin said the only thing he could manage before they dragged him away. Check his left pocket. Nobody heard him. The music was too loud. The crowd was too angry. And within 60 seconds, he was being taken out of the arena in handcuffs while 60,000 people booed. By midnight, the clip had 40 million views. By morning, 100 million. The headlines were merciless. Homeless man ruins live proposal. Stranger attacks man proposing to girlfriend on live TV. Fans furious after man destroys beautiful proposal moment. The comments were worse. He should be locked up forever. Poor Daniel, poor Serena. This is disgusting. What kind of person does this? Someone find out who he is. Calvin's face was everywhere. His name came out within hours. Then his background. Suspended paramedic. Lost his home. History of instability. The narrative was complete before a single fact had been verified. Daniel Marsh gave a short statement to the media the following morning. He looked composed, dignified, and heartbroken. "I just wanted to give her a beautiful memory," he said. "I hope we can still have that future together." Serena said nothing publicly. She had gone home, turned off her phone, and sat alone in her apartment trying to understand what had just happened to her life. Serena sat on her bathroom floor that night, not crying anymore, just still. She had cried for 2 hours and now there was nothing left. She kept replaying the moment. The ring flying, the crowd booing, the stranger being dragged away. But there was one thing she could not stop returning to. What he said before they took him. She had not heard the words clearly in the chaos, but she had read his lips. Check his left pocket. She had looked at Daniel immediately after. He was busy with the security guards, gesturing toward Calvin being removed. His jacket was still on. She had not checked his pocket. She had not thought to. But now, alone on her bathroom floor at 2 in the morning, she thought about something else. She thought about the night 6 weeks ago when she had found a small locked box under Daniel's side of the closet shelf. She had asked about it casually. He had laughed and said it was an old camera. She had not pushed. She had trusted him. She sat on the cold tile and she thought about that box for a very long time. Detective Priya Nair worked financial crimes for the Atlanta Police Department. She was 41 years old, methodical, and deeply allergic to easy conclusions. When the Calvin Webb case landed on the general desk, most officers saw a straightforward charge, assault, disruption of a public event, and wanted it processed quickly. But Priya had been in the building that night. She had been attending the game off-duty with her nephew. She had seen it happen from 30 rows up. And something about the way the homeless man had moved bothered her. It was not frantic. It was not random. It was precise. Priya requested access to the case. Her supervisor raised an eyebrow. "It is a simple assault," he said. "It will be processed in 2 days." "I just want to look at it for one afternoon," she said. Her supervisor shrugged and said yes. Priya pulled the arena security footage and watched it from 7 different camera angles. She watched Calvin for the entire first half. She watched him watching Daniel. She watched his eyes following Daniel's hands and jacket the whole time. She slowed the footage to the moment of the incident, frame by frame. And in one frame, half a second before Calvin moved, she saw something. The outline of an object in Daniel's left jacket pocket. It could have been a phone. It could have been a wallet. But the shape was wrong for both. Priya sat very still in her chair. Then she picked up her phone and made a call. Calvin sat in the holding cell and stared at the floor. He had been here for 2 days. He had not eaten much. He had a public defender he had spoken to for exactly 11 minutes. The charge was assault and public endangerment. His lawyer had already mentioned a plea deal. Calvin had declined. "I am not pleading guilty to something I did to save her life," he said. Your lawyer had looked at him with the patient exhaustion of someone who has heard that sentence too many times to believe it. Then a guard appeared at his cell. "Someone wants to talk to you." He was taken to an interview room. A woman was sitting at the table. Short, dark hair, badge on her belt. She was looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. Not dismissive, not warm, careful. "I am Detective Priya Nair," she said. "I have been reviewing the security footage from the night of the incident." She paused. "I need you to tell me everything you saw," Calvin told her. He told her about the shelter, the volunteer day, the mask slipping for 1 second. He told her about the forum post, about R, about the pattern. He told her about the $40 ticket and sitting 3 rows back watching Daniel's hands all night. He told her what he saw in the left jacket pocket when Daniel reached in to pull out the ring box. His voice did not shake. He was not asking her to believe him. He was reporting the way he had always reported, clearly and completely, because that was what the situation required. When he finished, Priya was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "The shape you described, what made you certain it was a firearm and not a phone or wallet?" Calvin looked at her. "Because a wallet does not have a trigger guard outline. And because I have carried a trauma kit next to a first responder's holster for 14 years. I know what a concealed firearm looks like under fabric." Priya wrote something in her notebook. Then she stood up. "I am going to need a few days," she said. "Do not take the plea deal." Calvin looked at her the way he had looked at Serena in the arena, direct, steady, and exhausted. "Why are you listening to me?" he asked. She picked up her notebook. "Because when everyone else sees a simple story, that is exactly when I look closer." Priya worked quietly and methodically for 4 days. She pulled Daniel Marsh's background. Clean record. No arrests. Nothing. She pulled his financial records through a subpoena. Also clean. She pulled social records, and that is where she found the thread. A civil complaint filed 18 months ago by a woman in Buckhead. The complaint had been withdrawn before trial. The woman's name was Rachel, initial R. Priya tracked her down. Rachel agreed to speak under condition of anonymity. She described 2 years with Daniel Marsh that matched every detail of the forum post Calvin had found. She described the control, the isolation, the weekend she was locked in. She described the gun. "He always kept it nearby," Rachel said. "Always in his jacket or the nightstand. He never directly threatened me with it. He just made sure I always knew it was there." "That is a threat," Priya said quietly. Rachel nodded. "I know that now." Priya pulled Daniel's firearms registration. He had a registered handgun, a compact semi-automatic that fit precisely the dimensions of the outline in the arena security footage. She pulled footage from the arena parking lot. She found Daniel's car. She found him arriving. She found him walking in. And in the parking lot footage, through a camera angle over his shoulder as he opened his car door to get out, she caught a clear glimpse of the left side of his jacket. The outline was there. He had brought the gun into the arena, Priya sat with everything she had laid in front of her on her desk, and she thought about what it meant. Daniel Marsh had brought a registered concealed firearm to a public arena. That was a weapons violation. Daniel Marsh had a documented history of controlling behavior with a prior partner. Daniel Marsh was preparing to publicly bind Serena Voss to him in front of 10 million people. Calvin Webb had seen the gun and intervened. The picture it formed was not a certainty. Priya had been in this job long enough to know she did not have everything, but she had enough to move. She picked up her phone and called Serena Voss. Serena had not posted anything in 4 days. Her management team was nervous. Her brand partners were sending emails. The internet was waiting for her to say something, to defend Daniel, to address the incident, to give people what they wanted. Serena had not responded to any of it. She was sitting in her apartment, reading the same forum post Calvin had found, which Priya had forwarded to her before the call. She had read it 12 times. When Priya arrived at her apartment, Serena opened the door in sweatpants with no makeup, which was the most honest version of herself she had shown anyone in a long time. They sat at her kitchen table. Priya showed her the evidence: the gun registration, the parking lot footage, the outline in the jacket, Rachel's testimony, the withdrawn complaint. Serena looked at each piece of evidence without speaking. When she finally looked up, her eyes were dry. She had finished crying 4 days ago. "He brought a gun to our proposal," she said. "It was not a question." Priya nodded. "We believe so, yes." Serena was quiet for a moment. "And that man, Calvin, he saw it." Priya nodded again. "We believe he saw it and intervened." Serena looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. "I have 4 million people who watched that happen," she said slowly, "and every single one of them thinks he is the villain." Daniel Marsh was arrested 6 days after the proposal. The charge was illegal carry of a concealed firearm in a public venue. The arena was a gun-free zone. His registered weapon permit did not cover it. When police searched his apartment with a warrant, they also found evidence that corroborated Rachel's civil complaint and something else: a folder on his laptop containing detailed records of Serena's schedule, her passwords to several of her accounts, and a series of messages to a private number discussing how to access her business finances after marriage. It was not a love story. It had never been one. The arrest made the news. But the bigger news was what happened the day after. Serena posted a video. She sat at her kitchen table, no ring light, no brand backdrop, no carefully chosen outfit, just her face, her voice, and the truth. She told her 4 million followers everything. She explained what Calvin had seen. She explained what he had risked and lost. She explained what had been found. Then she said something that made every comment section go quiet. "I stood there humiliated in front of 60,000 people, and I let you all hate a man who was trying to save me. He had $40 left in the world, and he spent it on a ticket to stop something terrible from happening to a stranger. He lost everything once already, and he risked losing it again for me. I did not know his name. He did not know mine. He just saw something wrong, and he did the right thing when everyone was telling him he had no right to do anything at all." The video reached 30 million views in 24 hours. The comments changed completely. "This man is a hero. Find him. Someone help him. We were all so wrong. I am ashamed of what I said in those first comments." Calvin was released from custody the morning after Daniel's arrest. All charges dropped, record cleared. He walked out of the building into Atlanta morning air and stood on the sidewalk for a moment just breathing. He did not have anywhere specific to go. He still did not have an apartment. He still did not have his paramedic license back. He still had almost nothing, but something felt different. The weight of being disbelieved had lifted. He thought about his mother who had raised him in Birmingham, telling him that doing the right thing and getting credit for it are two separate things, and you only get to control one of them. He had held on to that for 2 years on the streets. He had held on to it in that arena. He had held on to it in the cell. He pulled out the small notebook he kept in his jacket pocket, the one where he wrote down things he wanted to remember, and he wrote 3 words: "She is safe." Then he put the notebook away and started walking. Serena called him 3 days later. She had gotten his number through Detective Priya. The phone rang, and Calvin almost did not answer because he did not recognize the number. "Hello," he said carefully. "Calvin, this is Serena Voss." He said nothing for a moment. I know I cannot give you back what you went through, Serena said. Her voice was steady but not performative. This was not a PR call. I know that what happened to you because of me and because of everyone who watched that video and decided before asking a single question, I know that is not fixed with a phone call. But I wanted you to hear my voice saying this directly. Thank you. Thank you for spending your last $40. Thank you for staying when security grabbed you. Thank you for not fighting back, which would have made everything worse. And thank you for trying to warn me even when you had no reason to believe anyone would listen. Calvin was quiet for a moment. Is she okay? He asked. That was the only thing he said. Serena felt her throat tighten. I am okay, she said, because of you. She offered him help, an apartment covered for 6 months while he got back on his feet. A formal letter to the paramedic licensing board from her platform and from Rachel, whose testimony had now been made official. A connection to an attorney who worked pro bono on license reinstatement cases. Calvin accepted the apartment. He hesitated on everything else, but Serena was patient and firm. You are not accepting charity, she said. You are accepting what should have been available to you long before any of this happened. He accepted. 6 weeks after the proposal that wasn't, Calvin sat in a small office at a community health clinic in Southwest Atlanta. He was not yet a fully licensed paramedic again. That process was still ongoing, but the clinic had hired him as a community health educator while his reinstatement moved through the board. He taught basic first aid, he ran street outreach to unhoused individuals, and he consulted on emergency response protocols for community events. Every day he worked with people the city had forgotten, people who were invisible, people who knew things nobody would listen to, people who had been right about something important and paid a terrible price for it. He was good at the work in a way that had nothing to do with training and everything to do with lived experience. One morning, his supervisor, a doctor named Marcus Okafor, knocked on his office door. You have a visitor, Dr. Okafor said, looking slightly stunned. Serena Voss was standing in the hallway. She was wearing jeans and a plain sweater. She looked nothing like the glossy version of herself on her pages. She looked like a person. Calvin stood up. She held out her hand. I wanted to see where you work, she said. I wanted to see what you do. He showed her around the clinic. She listened more than she talked. When they sat down in the small break room afterward with paper cups of bad coffee, she told him she had started a new project. She was using her platform to fund mental health and housing support for people who had lost their homes due to wrongful job termination or licensing disputes. Paramedics, nurses, teachers, social workers. People who had spent their lives in service and been failed by the systems they served. I am calling it the Bloom Foundation, she said. Same name as the brand, but different purpose. She looked at him. I would like you to be on the advisory board if you are willing. I want people who have been through it, not just people who want to help from a comfortable distance. Calvin looked at her for a long moment. Why me specifically? Because you spent 14 years learning to see what others miss, she said. And when it mattered most, you used that. That is exactly what this foundation needs. 2 months after that conversation, the state licensing board reinstated Calvin Webb's paramedic certification. He sat in the hearing room while the board chair read the decision, and he did not cry, though he wanted to. He thought about every call he had ever run, every person he had helped, every moment in those 14 years where he had been exactly what someone needed and never once asked for recognition in return. He thought about the $40 ticket. He thought about the ring flying through the air in a spray of arena light. He thought about Serena's face in that moment, confused and humiliated and frightened, and how he would make the same choice again without hesitation, even knowing everything it would cost him. 6 months after the halftime proposal, Calvin stood at a podium at a community health conference in Atlanta. 400 people in the room, doctors, social workers, city officials, and advocates. Serena sat in the front row. Detective Priya sat 2 seats from her. Calvin looked out at the room and took a breath. I spent 8 months homeless in this city, he began. And in those 8 months, I learned something that 14 years as a paramedic had started to teach me but never finished. He paused. When people are in crisis, The most dangerous thing is not always the threat you can see. It is the threats that happen in front of everyone while everyone is looking somewhere else. He talked about the night at the arena, about what he saw, about what happened, about the cell and the charges and the silence. But then he said something that made the room shift. The problem is not that nobody cared, he said. The problem is that caring without listening is not enough. That night, 60,000 people cared about Serena. 10 million people cared about Serena. They just did not listen to the one person who could see what was happening, because that person did not look like someone worth listening to. He let that sit. We make decisions every single day about whose voice counts, about who gets to be taken seriously, about who is credible and who is not. And most of the time, we make those decisions based on what someone is wearing, what job they have, where they sleep. He looked out at the room. That has to change. Not because it is politically convenient, but because it is dangerous. Because the truth does not care who is telling it. And sometimes the person who can see what everyone else is missing is the person we have decided in advance not to hear. The room was completely still. Then it was not. 1 year after the night at the arena, Calvin and Serena sat across from each other in a small restaurant near the clinic. It was nothing fancy, just good food and a quiet table. They had become something that neither of them had a perfect word for. Not exactly friends in the ordinary sense. Something that had been forged in an unusual fire and survived. "How are you really doing?" Serena asked. Calvin thought about it honestly. "I have my license back. I have work I believe in. I have an apartment with a window that gets afternoon light." He smiled slightly. "I would say I am doing well." She nodded. "And the foundation, the advisory work, is it too much alongside the clinic?" "No," he said. "Actually, it feels like the same work in a different room." She looked at him over her coffee. "Do you ever think about that night?" He was quiet for a moment. "Every day. But not with regret. With something more like perspective." He turned the coffee cup in his hands. "That night I had $40, no credibility, and no proof of anything. And I still could not stand there and do nothing." He looked at her. "I think that is the only version of myself I actually respect." Serena was quiet for a moment. "The version of you that showed up for a stranger with nothing to gain?" She said. "Yes," Calvin said simply. "That one." Subscribe if you believe that the people this world has written off might be the very ones it needs most. Only people who judge worth by surface would scroll past without stopping. Don't be that person. Subscribe if you believe that listening costs nothing and saves everything. And if you think every voice deserves to be heard, regardless of what that person is wearing or where they slept last night. Drop the words "I will listen" in the comments right now. Tell us where you are watching from. And tell us, have you ever dismissed someone quickly and later realized they were right? We read every single comment. We want to hear your story. Like this video, if Calvin's courage reminded you that doing the right thing and being safe are sometimes two completely different choices, and that real character is choosing right anyway. Share this with someone who needs to remember that invisible does not mean unimportant. Subscribe so you never miss our next story. Remember, the next person you almost walk past might be the one who changes everything. See you in the next story, friends. Until then, listen to people. Not just the ones who look like they deserve to be heard. All of them.